One.
Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to the first episode of Rascal Chamber Racing.
A
This
good
is going
name.
to be your new go-to for motorsport and sim racing games. So, welcome with me today. I have the fountain of knowledge of F1. It is Mr. Joshua Pemberton.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning. How are
How
you
are you,
doing today,
sir?
sir?
I'm good. How are you, sir?
Fantastic.
Fresh from his first ever victory on Project Cars 2.
I am indeed, yes. So, started the championship on Project Cars 2, the first couple of races. I'm languishing. I'm on my new sim setup and I'm in 12th position and I just can't get this. I start to get sectors that are fast, right? So in those races, and they're going, radio controls going, fantastic, the fastest sector. Then crash, can't get the car right. Finally, the third race in practice, I set it up, getting some faster sectors, still can't get the thing round. Then qualifying. I have the most magic qualifying ever. I'm, I think, a second and a half faster than the rest of the pack. And then race day comes. Now, I've been telling you throughout the week. Um, I've been waiting nervously to do this race. Eventually, I do the race. I make a, I make an okay start, but then the car in second overtakes. I know I've got to get it back within that lap. Okay, because I do not want to be chasing. I do not want to be losing pace. I know how to do this lap. Okay. Then I overtake on the first lap and I just get faster and faster and faster and faster, Verstappen it throughout the rest of the race. And oh, you heard yesterday when I sent you the messages, I was absolutely over the moon. Yeah.
Anyone who says it's just a game, it isn't to us. It
It
really
isn't.
isn't. You get
It really
so
isn't.
into it.
Because you won yesterday as well, right? You had a race
I
on F1.
so I purchased a couple of games yesterday. I purchased the new F1 game, but also on this. So because we to preface this to people who will be watching, listening for the first time, we both live in China, so um, sometimes it's hard to get games unless you go on the actual store. But there's a website called Taobao, which is basically Chinese Amazon, and I found a seller on there because I was after a football game that Jimmy knows far too well. Um, but he also had some F1 games. The new one he had was cheaper. Like on the PlayStation Store, F1 2023 is like £35. I got it for about 13.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and F1 and he had F1 2020 for about £3 or £4. And I thought F1 2020 was the last game with classic cars. Plus, I like some of the driver lineups, and just I never really played it when I had it, and so I got it, and I did a race. I did my first race was as Daniel Ricciardo because it's installing everything, so you're only allowed to race on one circuit. So Daniel Ricciardo in a Renault, I start 11th, I finish 7th, or I almost finished 6th, overtaking Max Verstappen around the outside and then smacking into the wall and driving across the line with no front wing.
Oh, wow.
But then I picked Alex Albon now, to those of you who are F1 fans. And even if you're not F1 fans, welcome along. Hopefully you'll be converted in some way, although based on this season. Um, I had Alex Albon. And, like, if you don't do qualifying or everything, they give you a random position on the grid.
Yeah.
They stick Albano in P2.
Oh,
Start of the
wow.
race, Valtteri Bottas on pole in the Mercedes gets a bit of wheel spin. Albano is alongside and ahead going into turn one, and for the next 4 laps, that's where he stayed, and he won.
Oh, fantastic.
And I would
And
love
that's
Alex Albon to win a race.
exactly, and that's kind of the situation you'd imagine he could win it in, and
Yeah.
especially that season,
Mm.
that's pretty decent because Bottas was quick in that Mercedes, So for you
Bottas.
to take that position and then keep it there was good. So yeah, we're on a high from our sim racing exploits. We must kind of tell you that. So as you can see, or maybe you won't be able to see, but at the moment we have the background, and in my background I've got my sim racing setup. So I use the kind of wheel setup, but Mr. Pemberton here uses the controller. So
I
when we
do.
talk about games, we're going to sometimes compare the experience with the sim racing wheel and the controller.
Yeah,
and kind of
I,
give you a bit of
I, I
insight into
am
what
I
it's like.
am the devil sim racer because I use a controller and I can just hear a legion of sim racing enthusiasts going.
But
Big.
what I feel has happened is that for both experiences, it's getting more detailed, realistic, and in
Yeah, it
depth. And
is.
I think it's really good. So we're going to come to that a little bit later. What I would like to do first, though, Josh, is I like for you to tell everybody why you love motorsport and sim racing so much. Like, what's your background? How did you get into this?
So how I got into motor racing in general, when I was a kid, there I would see. Now, my first stepdad, who was a horrible, horrible man, the one thing I'll give him credit for was he was into F1. So I would see it on the TV and I was kind of interested. And then I'd start getting into it a bit more. And there was one name I kept hearing who kept winning. That was the man on the front of this background, one Mr. Michael Schumacher. Now, that was one name synonymous with me when I was a kid. The other name wasn't a driver, but it was a man that you would refer to as the voice of Formula One, and that was Murray Walker. So you got Schumacher,
Of
Walker,
course.
and that was my education. So I properly started getting into it. I started getting kind of into it in 1999. Um, I saw like the odd race here and there. I remember vividly Mika Hakkinen spinning off at Monza when he was leading. I vaguely remember Johnny Herbert winning the European Grand Prix in 1999, and then Schumacher coming back from a broken leg. But 2000 was the year where I first started properly watching, properly taking an interest, reading books about it, playing games on it as well. Around that time, I'd had F1 97, and then I got EA Sports' F1 2000. So it started from there really, and
Yeah.
now been a thing. Anyone will tell you like I love. My wife knows I love football, love motor racing. Like for Christmas, she got me two books, one on Ferrari and one on like a massive encyclopedia of F1, which to some people is
Yeah.
just a book, and to me it's just very strong pornography.
I mean, for you, like you've got like such a vast knowledge of Formula One. It's just crazy, and we're obviously going to tap into that as this series continues, which I'm really excited about.
Quizzes,
So yeah, oh, quizzes. Yeah, I'm gonna have to
quizzes.
start. I'm gonna have to start studying up. So yeah, for myself, obviously I also watched Formula One during that period. But for me, I used to take a little bit of solace. I remember when I was a kid, I probably wasn't the most popular kid, and I used to find myself in the library a lot. And I remember this one book that kind of like I don't know, saved me is a bit of a cliche, but during that time, there was this F1 history book, and I was looking at all these pictures of like the Van Walls from the 1950s, and then the Lotuses of Clark. So, and I think this is probably still quite evident now because when me and you both talk about F1, I'll probably find myself veering towards talking about that era a little bit more, and you'll often find yourself talking about the kind of last 20 or 30 years little bit
Mm.
more. And even though we both know a lot about those periods as well, it's just that we often take our little fancies into those eras. And for me, I was a massive scale extra collector when I was younger as
Oh,
well. So I
classic.
had a lot of any chance I could get. So I had this. I presume it was probably like a 1959 Van Wall scale extreme model that I used to have around the track. But at the time, I also had because my first scale extreme set was actually an F1 set with a Jordan and a Williams car included. So I believe it was from around 1998, something like that. So it was yeah, that was my first one. So I had those cars, and then as I built up my collection, I of course I included some Le Mans cars. I had some kind of BMW F1 cars from the mid 2000s, etc. So yeah, Scale X was really that way for me to kind of imagine myself being a race driver because we both never had the opportunity where we could go karting on a regular basis. So it was always this kind of like how can I imagine myself in that racing seat? And for me at that time, it was Scale Electric. And yeah, there was a few games like I remember F1, I think 2003 really resonated with me. I used to love
Oh, that game was
that.
hard.
It was
They
hard.
used to cut the chicane. At Montreal, the last chicane. I used to cut
Yeah.
that like a badass. I won my first race there actually in a BAR.
And the only at least you tried more circuits, because for me it was only Monza that I could manage on.
Monza was my
Yeah,
first. So when I got
yeah,
a PlayStation 2,
yeah,
my first one of the launch titles was F1 2001 by EA Sports, which I maintain is still amazing. And
yeah.
if Cody's and EA could tap more back into that, that'd be
Let's
great.
hope they do. Let's really hope they do. Yeah.
Although
Um,
I need to properly play F1 23 to give you to like rule the roost.
yeah, I think hopefully we see a little bit more of that era coming back into the game.
But yeah,
And I
Monza was
think
my first. Monza was my
yeah,
go-to track as well.
Monza was the go-to for sure. I think the final kind of thing that really um where I had that dream of kind of motor racing, and like I say, it was always like you were living vicariously
Yeah.
through another form, as you should do as kids. Imagine these scenarios.
Oh, I
My
still imagine that I'm a racing driver.
Exactly. And I think, like we'll get onto later, it's kind of becoming a little bit more possible these days as well to kind of imagine it a bit more.
That is
But
true.
we had a tech car. I don't know if any of you listeners will remember those. I think it was like a German pedal go-kart company, and they made these go-karts. Now, I think it was my birthday, got it for Christmas, and for some reason, I think he was going to get that was going to be his big present. So instead of getting one of the cheaper ones with a plastic wheel, he ended up getting one with the inflatable wheels. So it actually had like, tire pressure was actually a thing on this pedal go-kart. So we used to do a lot of downhill like racing, either against other kids in their go-karts or against kids on bicycles. And I remember this one time, which I wouldn't advocate because it was dangerous, but we at the top of the village, there was this little opening, right, from where the park led out to the top road, and it was almost like a pit lane because it was like that was where you came out of, and it was you start, and then you could drop the go-kart, at least at the beginning. It used to get stuck later, but you could drop the go-kart into like a freewheeling gear instead of like having to pedal. So as soon as you pedal down to the first second of the hill, then you pop it into the gear, and then you would just like we would just drive down, avoiding cars on the way down. And then by the time we got to the bottom, the very, very bottom of the hill, we just do this big, because it had like a handbrake, big handbrake turn at the bottom. And like as I was going down the hill, I was imagining I was like David Coulthard or these F1 stars of the time, and doing real escape in driving, whether that was like either virtually with the Scale Electric or in that go kart, that pedal go kart. I think it was just, and I don't think that's ever left me, and I don't think it's ever left you either.
No. I'd like to give a shout out to my mum though, who also saw that I was getting into F1 and really fueled it a bit more. So when I lived in Wales, which is where the F1 obsession started, she turned my bedroom into a whole F1 thing. She painted, so like on one wall there was the whole side of a 1999 Jordan
Oh
with
wow.
crowds. Behind where I would sleep, behind me was the front end of a Ferrari, and then on the other wall was the back end of a Benetton that she drew and painted herself.
That's
Um,
incredible.
she got me overalls, and then on the other side of the bedroom, it was all like black and white checkered, and then there were two outlines of a Ferrari and a McLaren driver using this guy, and that would represent like the podium area.
Oh wow, that
And
is
I had
absolutely
like these
amazing.
empty bottles, so I'd be pretending I'd be like spraying of the champagne.
like a like a San Pellegrino or something, like something.
Basically,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Oh
Or
right. No, it
spraying
was,
rose water like they do in Bahrain.
yeah, exactly. It would have been acceptable for you at that time. But
Yeah.
yeah, remember now you mentioned about bedrooms. There was one guy that I think it was my brother's friend, and I went around to his house, and he was one of these where his mum and dad were a bit older, so the house was like immaculate all the time. I remember. I went into his bedroom, and he also had the not as fancy decorated as that, but he had a lot of like F1 memorabilia. He had this poster of Coulthard's McLaren, and he had like this model of Schumacher's Ferrari, and he had all this stuff around as well.
Yeah.
So he was, and that was also that hill, the bottom of the hill where I would stop with the go kart was where his house. So,
Convenient.
oh, let's go in there. But I think he watched it a lot more diligently than I did back then. So it was kind of like you entered this like world of like, can he be telling me about, or what was going on? I probably a bit like yourself now. He knew a lot about the sport. Um, so yeah, um, fantastic. So I think with regards F1, we're
Yes.
gonna now just travel in time back to the modern era, and we're gonna have a little bit of a discussion about
A
this
rant.
season.
A
And
rant. We're
it's
going to
gonna
have
be
a
a rant.
rant.
Yes. So let's leave this. Well, let's start the rant. I'll let you start the rant because I know you've got a lot to say. You're eager there. I can see you bubbling away.
I cannot remember a season in my lifetime that has been so boring. And I will admit, I've lived through Schumacher domination, Vettel domination. I've lived through Mercedes domination.
Yeah.
But I I feel, let's go back. I feel it was Schumacher's domination. It was down to the fact that, obviously, in all dominant periods, the car is one of the main things, and also the driver
Yeah.
as well. But I feel like the Schumacher dominance, considering the drivers he drove against, you needed somebody. He had like the likes of Hakkinen for a couple of years. Coulthard was no
Yeah.
slouch. He had Montoya, who came in 2001 and just thought, "Oh, you're a world champion, are you?" No, I don't care. His
Yeah.
brother. There were drivers there of a particular caliber that he'd have to
Yeah.
work,
Oh,
like Kimi
definitely.
Raikkonen as well, that he had to work so hard to try and beat. And Ferrari always had to be sort of one step ahead. So in the sense, you know, and again with Vettel's period as well, there were drivers there that, you know, could do the business. I look at Max's domination at the moment, and I feel like there are drivers there that could potentially do it, but not as many as um, Michael's era. And firstly, you have to praise Red Bull. You do. Since the rules came in last year, they've adapted to them. They've been brilliant. You can't say that they haven't deserved it. You can only beat what's in front of you at the end of the day. But I just feel that in F1 now, there's no the engineers and aerodynamicists and the people who work on the cars, they're not given creative freedom. There's like, here is a spreadsheet of rules, you must stick to them rigidly. Whereas back in the day, you could deviate a little bit. And if something was illegal, then, it'd be stamped out. But I feel like it's just, oh, everyone has to have the same, and there's not really much innovation, and it doesn't really, you know,
Yeah.
doesn't really go anywhere. I probably sound like I'm moaning, but that's where it is. And also, DRS. Can we please get rid of it? Or can we have a
Yeah. Yeah.
system
I
like they
agree.
have in IndyCar where it's push to pass? Because in IndyCar, they have a button, it gives them a bit of a boost. The driver who attacks can have it, but also the driver who is defending has it as well.
Exactly.
So you have to, there's a bit of a strategical element to it. It's like, oh, I've got this amount of time left for this. Do I use it now or do I wait? Try and keep the person in front of me close. And then when they've run out defending, away I go. Because I just feel like every move with DRS is so easy.
Yeah. It is.
It's like
I feel
Mario Kart.
it is a bit. I feel like with Red Bull's dominance as well, because I was talking to you a little bit last night about it. It's like Ferrari missed a trick last season.
Oh,
They-
don't even start.
And if their strategy had have been, I mean, not even if they'd have at least used a little bit of common sense, because oh my God, I don't know what they were doing.
Ferrari and common sense don't go hand in hand at the moment. It hasn't gone hand in hand since, well, the last time they won a title, which was 2007.
Because I've got to be honest, I would probably there's no two drivers. I'm talking about some great driver lines, but I think Carlos Sainz and Leclerc are fantastic,
Mm.
and it's a shame that they really didn't capitalize on that. And at least then we could have had well, it would have gone maybe more to the wire had their strategy gone better. And then if Red Bull dominated this season, we might not have been so bitter. I think that might have
Yeah.
actually, yeah. Um, but now, because they seem to, Red Bull remember, they had teething problems last season as
They
well.
did. First, I think Verstappen retired from two of the first three rounds of the year.
Exactly. So if Ferrari had have capitalized on that, then we might have seen a bit more. And even if Red Bull had won, fine. We've had that nice little, horse race.
Yeah,
But to the stage where, all the other teams kind of left behind, particularly at the beginning of the season, and Red Bull have ran away with it. They really know what they're doing with these new regulations. They're getting the most out of the car.
yeah.
Exciting though to see McLaren starting to like fight back
That
a little
has
bit.
been when you
Yeah,
consider when they turned up to Bahrain
yeah,
and what was it? What were they like 16th? I know Piastri was at the back and
yeah,
Norris wasn't there, and I think it was from Silverstone onwards.
yeah. Silverstone,
No,
I think.
no, no, no. It was from Spain onwards because Lando qualified third in Spain, but he was retired at the end of the first lap because he hit.
Oh yeah, yeah,
But from
yeah.
the first podium that Norris got in Silverstone, McLaren have just been on fire. We were all
They have.
thinking at the start of the year, Aston Martin are going to be, second in the
Oh
championship
yeah.
because Alonso was
Alonso
getting
was looking
podium.
quick. Yeah.
But, and we'll get to Aston Martin in a second, and you know where I'm going to go with this. You can
You're
just
going
have.
for a stroll.
But with McLaren, I tell you what, I feel like if their car now had been that at the start of the season, we would be talking about a much closer championship because I genuinely believe they'd have won race. I mean, Piastri's won a sprint race. How annoyed do you think Lando is?
Oh yeah, yeah.
He never
He's gonna
won.
be.
He didn't win the Italian Grand Prix in 2021. He was told to hold station behind Ricciardo.
Yeah.
Um, and then Oscar comes in this year and wins. I know it's a sprint race and it's not classed as a Grand Prix. Again, that's another thing I need to rant about at some point. I feel like this podcast will take 3 hours though if I keep ranting. Um, Piastri's come in, wins a sprint race. How annoyed do you think Lando is?
He's
He's
gonna
like,
be
yeah, it's a great day for the
seething.
team. Great day for the team. Deep down, going, you. Mm.
Yeah, his character is going to be really seasoned, but that's going to be great because he's really going to want to outdo him. So what I'm hoping is next season we're going to see a lot more McLaren, uh, wins. Even if they don't win the drivers or the constructors championship, at least we'll see them getting in and amongst it, and hopefully, yeah, see Norris and Piastri both winning because that would be great to see those two
It
trying to get
would.
the most Grand Prix
It
between them.
it would be great to see McLaren back up there because they
Yeah,
haven't won a championship since 2008, and the last
yeah,
time they challenged for a title was 11 years ago.
yeah,
The last time Ferrari won a title was 2007, and the last time they challenged for a title was, well, I mean, technically last year, but oh no, they also challenged in 17 and 18 and perhaps should have
yeah,
won it, but
yeah.
didn't
But again,
happen.
they didn't know. So hopefully they get their act together because it seems like Red Bull is so well oiled. But McLaren's pit stops in that last race, because
Oh,
because nobody's been able to touch Red Bull with a pit. Usually Red Bull are consistently the quickest, right? But
yeah,
but then McLaren's was like, what? So they're really, I think they're ready to take the fight to it. They've been slowly building actually McLaren. Yeah, they've
yeah.
had some inconsistencies, but over the last few years, they've slowly become, hey up, we're coming back.
I think
And
I think one of McLaren's biggest strengths is Zach Brown, the CEO. He came in
yeah,
to McLaren during when Alonso was there, and this was
yeah,
during the McLaren Honda years, which were no two ways about it, shit,
yeah,
really, really bad. Um, but he was patient. He brought in the right staff, the right people, and then you saw from like 2019 when they had Sainz and Norris. From
yeah,
2019 onwards, McLaren have just been a steady upward curve. Now,
exactly.
I would love them to go back to their classic black and silver livery or the red and white. But you know what? The Papaya Army is doing the business.
Yeah, exactly. That is one thing. Delivery, I don't really.
I
Yeah,
don't
I
like
know.
the livery
No,
this year. I'm not a
no, no.
fan.
I prefer the silver, like you say, or the red and white kind of thing. Yeah,
I'll admit, I did like the papaya when it was like 20. If it was like mostly orange
yeah,
with like little bits. Now, if you look at the Arrow McLarens in IndyCar, their livery works.
yeah,
I
yeah. It
like it
does.
because it's like quite subtle. Whereas the one this year for McLaren, it feels like a child was given paint and told go.
You know what? Speaking of IndyCar and we always have complaints. Again, we won't delve too much into this. I think it's probably another episode. The four seats that Red Bull have, right? So
Oh,
imagine though with what McLaren have, because I found this quite interesting when it was a few years ago, they presented the new F1 car livery, and they also presented it alongside their IndyCar and other motorsport
yeah.
endeavors. And imagine then if you could have the seats fluid between Indy and F1. Do you know
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say? That would be an interesting prospect because it's
I'm
like, well,
surprised that's not a thing.
yeah,
I deep down think that's why they've done it because they've
yeah,
spoken highly of Pato Award, and Pato does like a few practice sessions here and there.
yeah,
Funny story, Pato actually used to be on Red Bull's books.
really.
He did. I like Pato Award. I think he's brilliant.
Oh, he's a
I hope
fantastic
he
driver.
wins it
Yeah,
next year.
he's like an IndyCar legend, really, in
Which
recent
I
years.
mean, he's go. He could be. Alex
Yeah,
Palou is,
yeah,
although stunning,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah. He's
yeah,
one of those big names up there. So I think it would be great to have more
I think
crossover
so
in
too.
terms of,
And
yeah,
like, I hate the fact that right. I understand Red Bull buying Minardi,
yeah,
and I can understand why they created a system, but I feel like it shouldn't be allowed. There should
yeah,
not be a feeder team to the main team. And also, think about it. How many of the drivers that have gone from there to have been kind of successful? I can think of two, three
yeah,
actually.
yeah,
Vettel, Verstappen, Ricardo.
yeah.
Which most people say, oh, but two of those are world champions and one's a race winner. Meh. Like, yes, but then there are other drivers that they've had: the Sebastian Bourdais, the Buemis, the Alguersuaris, the Jean-Eric Verns. They had
Yeah,
Daniel Kvyat, and that failed spectacularly. They had Gasly, great at Toro Rosso, terrible in a Red Bull. Albon, harshly booted out.
yeah,
There's nobody in their junior program apart from Liam Lawson who look like they're
yeah.
capable of stepping up. And can someone please tell me why Lawson hasn't got a drive next
Well,
season?
exactly, and it's all linked to the same thing as well. That having these full seasons going, it should just be its own
It should.
team. And this is the middle of the pack team, and you're going to get into that, and then you'd be happy because then Gasly would never have felt bad of like because he would never have had the opportunity unless he was called to the other team without by the separate organization.
Yeah.
If you know what I'm trying to get at. So yeah,
And also, Gasly's more successful at Toro Rosso AlphaTauri because he won a race.
exactly, and he won a race. Yeah, and he got the bit between his teeth when he went back, and yeah, and obviously it's kind of all worked out okay. But yeah, the fact that Liam Lawson's losing out to kind of Ricardo. Don't get me wrong, Ricardo's a fantastic driver. Maybe
Oh yeah.
they can see that he's gonna do the business again in the Red Bull or probably the Red Bull. Let's face it, they're probably gonna put him in the Red Bull at some point. But it's not fair. Lawson has come in. He's literally taken on the opportunity that drivers get, and most of the time he takes them one settle. He didn't even he proved it then and there.
He literally turned up at Zandvoort at a
Yeah,
minute's notice because Ricardo injured his hand in practice. He came in, had one practice session, qualifying, finished a chaotic race of rain, and then two races later in Singapore, he gets 2 points for
yeah,
finishing ninth. All right, the last couple of races haven't been brilliant, but he's racing on circuits that Suzuka he knows, but he's never ever been to Qatar.
yeah,
You're sticking someone into such a high that race in Zandvoort, which was brilliant by the way. It was one of the few good
yeah,
ones. I know Max won, but the rain and the jeopardy of the rain and all of that,
yeah,
the chaos it caused, like to put any driver in there is insane. The fact that he finished, and the fact that he actually battled with a Ferrari at one
yeah,
point,
exactly. Yeah,
like
it was
it's a
a
hard
drive.
race to put someone in, but he's done the job, and I think I have a feeling the only seat that looks available is Williams, but I do think Williams will probably keep Sargent. Um,
Yeah,
I've nothing against Logan Sargent. He's definitely not Nicholas Latifi,
yeah.
which is always good. But
Oh,
yes,
do you not think that perhaps they might consider someone like Mick or someone like that,
Mick
Williams
or
or
maybe Felipe Drugovich, but I think Felipe Drugovich, who's on the books at Aston Martin, will probably end up in Formula E. Mick,
yeah,
I mean, I wouldn't say no to having Schumacher back on the F1 grid. I feel like he was harshly booted out by Haas because it was
yeah,
like the kid just scored points for you last year. He had 2 points finishes, but Gunter Steiner was like, yeah, but he wrecks the car and it's expensive. Like lots of drivers do. Good thing you didn't
yeah,
have
yeah.
Takuma Sato when he started.
But
Jesus.
I feel like Williams would be because it seems like with Albon as well because there's not that that pressure there at the back of the pack, and then actually, like he's done exceptionally well with a Williams this year,
Through
Albon, which
Albon.
is
Oh,
yeah. Uh,
he is in my top five for the season.
Oh, definitely.
I think he
He's
might be number two in my top five.
yeah. Oh yeah, he's up there. Like the drives he's having is insane. So if Nick, who clearly has a lot of talent, I mean, he won F3 and F2, right? Mixed
He
Humans.
did.
So let's face it, he's got talent. If he's able to hone that ability,
Yeah.
and refine it a little bit more in a Williams, and I don't feel like I think Williams is a bit more lenient than Haas, like where every time Gunther Steiner's like, oh Jane, it's always worrying about
They
the
made us look like a bunch of muppets today.
yeah, yeah.
You can't fuck smash my door. Oh, Gunter.
But I love it when he calls every time he calls Jane. Oh, Jane.
Yeah.
Oh, Jane.
We look like bloody legends today.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I
And I
can't
was
deal with them.
thinking, why did they do Schumacher when they needed a German? And I was like, okay, Hulkenberg's German, so they kept the German sponsor, and they still had a German
I
car.
will say I was in the camp of going, why have you brought Nico Hulkenberg back? Sure, he was a great super sub, but he hasn't raced
Yeah,
full time in 3 years. Why? I will hold my hands up and say I was wrong because
yeah.
he's been brilliant and
He
Magnussen has
has,
been terrible.
he has yeah, because obviously Magnussen came back strong that
Oh,
first,
his
but
first race back last year was
yeah,
amazing. Like,
yeah,
oh, I've just been called in at a minute's notice because they've got rid of Nikita Mazepin.
yeah. Yes.
Um, for that's the whole thing. The reason why they got rid of Nikita Mazepin was stupid because of the whole sort of like his dad's link with that was
That
unfair.
was too. That was. I heard that they've actually been finding out there's a chance that he can get back into motor racing because it's been lifted or something. But it
Yeah,
is stupid because like when somebody's an athlete, it shouldn't matter where they
yeah.
come from or whatever. That's separate to the sport.
I agree with Daniel Kvyat, and like he was even prepared to race under like a European flag, and I agree with Daniel Kvyat. Like just because Vladimir Putin is the one orchestrating a war to another country, it's not like the racing drivers haven't had anything to do with it.
Yeah, exactly. Racing drivers, they're racing. That's their job, and
So
it's
that
not
so that shouldn't have been the
shouldn't be
reason why
associated.
Mazepin was booted. The reason should have been why Mazepin was booted is because he was terrible.
Yeah, exactly. If it was on those grounds, but obviously he was another one of those kind of pay drivers brought in through his dad's sponsorship
Oh,
and whatever. So anyway, speaking of which, you wanted to talk about Aston Martin.
I did, I did. It and to be fair, Red Bull have this issue as well, where you've got one driver doing the business and then the other not
Yeah,
so much. But I feel like with Perez, it's just been confidence because Perez is a solid driver. Whereas at Aston Martin, you have a two-time world champion who hasn't won a race since 2013, who had 2 years off from the sport and came back, and he's still performing at such a high level, getting podiums. He's just been brilliant to watch this season. He's in my top five as well because he's not. Do you know he's qualified in the top 10 at every race this season?
oh yeah,
He's
he's
been
been
amazing. And then you've got Lance Stroll, who I'm sorry, I have seen his CV. Sure, he's won things, but he's won like his things are like Italian F4. He literally got an F1 seat in 2017 at Williams because partly, young driver and also because daddy
invested in the team at that time, right? Yeah,
invested in the team. Yeah, exactly. And then the only reason he got a drive at Racing Point was because Lawrence took over the team and Lance came in
yeah.
and Esteban Ocon was told to go away. This man,
Which, in fairness, he had a couple of okay races for Racing Point. Let's just for
yeah,
me to play devil's
2020, he
advocate.
did get a couple of
Yeah,
podiums and he did stick the car on pole in the wet. Fair play. Yes, he
yeah,
did. I
yeah.
will granted. Stroll has moments where he does look pretty all right. Those moments are not consistent enough. And
No,
if
they're not.
Aston Martin want to be considered a championship challenging team, which I think they do, hence why they've got Alonso,
Yeah,
they need another driver in there to back up the points. That was the reason that Red Bull gave for why Albon left, and they
yeah,
stuck Perez in. They wanted a driver who could, help score the big points. All
yeah,
right,
yeah.
this season it's not gone as well as it could have done, but still, the odd podium, things like that. Lance doesn't do that.
No.
The
because
highest position Lance has finished is, I think, sixth this season. Alonso's been second or third.
well, that's it. If he was consistent, you know, in the constructors, Aston Martin would be way higher.
Oh,
Yeah,
again, challenging for the championship.
yeah,
I feel like they should have just persuaded Sebastian to stay and told Lance,
yeah.
look, you're
Or,
going to
or,
be a
ima-
test
or
driver.
imagine someone like Perez and Alonso, something like
That's what I feel they should have done. I feel
the
like,
consistency and experience.
yeah, I feel like Perez and
So
Alonso at
he
Aston
was the
Martin.
racing point, wasn't he?
Perez and Alonso
Yeah,
at Aston Martin would be fantastic. It would be interesting
yeah,
because I feel like the driver market is going to be sort of similar for next year because I think 2025 is when it's going to be completely mental.
yeah,
So
yeah,
we'll see. It's weird though because I don't ever remember a time in the years I've watched Formula One where it looks like every driver is staying at the same team for next season.
yeah,
There's usually at least three changes.
yeah. I mean, we'll see. It looks suspiciously quiet. My feeling is that
There's a
we're gonna
big thing happening, isn't
there's-
there?
yeah, exactly.
I feel at the end of the season, Helmut Marko will do an assessment of Perez and will do his typical helmet thing of like, you know what? And
That's it.
then they will give McLaren a wad of money to take
Yeah,
Lando,
yeah,
and then McLaren will be like, "Oh no, we need to put someone in," and they've got options. They could also put Mick Schumacher in the McLaren because technically he's also technically one of their drivers as well, due to
yeah,
a deal they have with Mercedes, who are their engine supplier. But yeah, I just hope next season it's Ferrari get their act together. Mercedes, I never thought I'd say this. I hope Mercedes actually make a decent car
yeah.
purely for
Oh
George
yeah,
Russell.
exactly. Because if I mean George Russell's just a phenomenal driver, so if he actually gets a decent car,
Yeah.
um, he's going to do wonders with it.
How
He
annoyed
really
would you be if you're George? You're like, yes, I'm finally joining Mercedes, dominant team.
exactly,
Finally
and
got a
then
chance to win some races and championships, and and the car's just not there. Although, fair play to him, last season he did beat Hamilton fair and square, and he won a race.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it's only a matter of time. If all goes well, the trajectory should look good because all these teams, if they can really get a hold and start sorting things out, we should have a lot more teams next year fighting it out. But that's kind of almost considering that Red Bull are going to put a foot wrong, which doesn't look like they're going to do anytime soon. So
As Ron Dennis once said, when it came to like things getting banned for aerodynamics and stuff like that, he's like, things like this shouldn't be made illegal. It should be, teams shouldn't complain. They should just rise to the technical challenge.
yeah,
That's what everyone needs to do. Here's what Red Bull
exactly.
have done. Step up, rise to it.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
especially if you're Mercedes and Ferrari and you've got pretty much unlimited resources.
Oh, exactly. They kind of have no excuse. I mean, yeah, all three. I mean, Red Bull as well. They're
Aston
no
Martin
doubt.
as well.
Yeah, yeah. They're all teams with money. So,
Hmm.
um, but yeah, of course, I think with Ferrari, particularly last season, they seem to be like left behind. They weren't up with the modern times of what needed to be done in terms of strategy. There was if they sort all that out, not just Ferrari but everyone, they sort out the technical side of things, they sort out the strategy. They produce good cars for their amazing drivers. Because let's face it, all these teams have fantastic drivers who can produce results.
Apart from Lance.
But yeah, apart from Lance Stroll. So
Unbelievable.
imagine they've all got fantastic cars that aren't going to go wrong. The
Yeah,
strategy is all going to be pretty much up there. The pit stops are all going to be so quick.
yeah,
Then, then we, then we start to see like, okay, and we, that's.
yeah. Who's been your driver of the season so far?
I think. I mean, I've just enjoyed watching Albon. One person I was because at the beginning I was, and I have eaten my hat and I take everything back because
Oscar?
I was like, yes, Oscar Piastri, because I was like, because at the beginning it was looking a bit, and I was like, oh, why did they get rid of Ricard? And then I was like, oh, yes,
Like, oh,
I-
why did they go through this whole contractual saga to get this Australian kid? He's not doing anything, and then
yeah. And
it
so so
turns out
so
we were wrong.
So probably Piastri, because I've been like, oh, and then, oh, that kid's still there. What?
What's
he's
this? He's
defend,
leading?
he's defending so well. I didn't expect this, and so probably Piastri at Albon because Albon's personality kind of looks similar to myself. He's not the most outward confident guy, but he's one of those people who's quiet but will persevere. So I think I see something about Albon I can connect to, and I'm like, come on, it isn't just cocky guys who can get results.
Albon is brilliant. I think I I'm glad that he had to have a year off from.
Yeah. Hello. I think we're gonna get Josh back
Hello.
in one moment. It's okay. I've just told everybody we were gonna get you back, and we
Oh,
have.
sorry.
Thank you.
I forgot my laptop decided that it's been an hour. It needs to sleep. Don't worry. I'm gonna solve the problem. I will edit that out. Or we'll just keep it in because you know what? Why the hell not? It's a podcast. Things go wrong.
That's it.
Things go wrong.
Things go wrong.
What was I was making a point and I've completely lost that point.
about Alex Albon.
Oh yeah, I felt sorry why Albon. I felt sorry for Albon the fact that he got booted out of 2020, but I felt like him going to Williams last year was a genius idea because he got a chance to one be a number one driver and two he
Yeah,
was in a team where there would be no pressure on him,
exactly.
and he has exceeded expectations. The fact that Williams are sort of seventh in the constructors, which is better than where they have been in recent years, and all of those points are scored by Alex.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
It's amazing.
it's such a big turnaround. Like Williams were rock bottom. You know, remember a few seasons back they were like they were carrying parts by hand for testing because they'd forgotten
Oh
them.
yeah,
So like considering like
2019. Oh,
so considering like that fiasco to now, you know what I mean? And it is
it's
a shame because obviously Williams is such
it's an iconic name.
an iconic, you know, you think of Mansell, Red 5 and all that, and it's, you know,
Villeneuve,
yeah,
Hill.
Villeneuve, yeah, Hill, yeah. So it's just such a, you know, such an iconic. So I'm glad that now it's looking like, yeah, you know, they can be challenging in a few races
Yeah.
and hopefully slowly picking up a bit more.
Can you can you believe it's been nearly 30 years since Williams won a title?
Oh yeah, I can and I can't. It's crazy because you remember them like as kid, even when we were kids growing up, you can remember them, you know, challenging and being up there. But for them to have taken the trajectory they did, and we've seen how low it's got, and you can. But now, because basically what's happening is that they've got a lot. Because the guy who's running them now basically was at
James
Mercedes.
Vowles.
He was at Mercedes before,
Mm.
right? So it's they've obviously got this nice little thing going with Mercedes, you know. So
Well,
it's
also the thing is like the landscape in terms of economy in F1 has changed, and you've got to remember Williams are an independent team. They weren't a massive car
exactly
manufacturer that came in. They were literally, created by Sir Frank Williams. Like McLaren weren't were independent, and now all of a sudden are a massive car division as well. Williams
exactly.
are not that. So the fact that they are still in F1 is amazing, and the thought of them potentially at times not being on the grid is just unthinkable. A name like Williams, yes, it's a heritage name and it needs to stay on the grid, but it deserves like that investment. And I feel like since I think it's called Doralton Capital, who took over them in
Yeah,
2021. Like since they came
that
in,
sounds
they
about
put the
right.
finances in. It's been brilliant. Jos Capito, when he was team boss, was just great. James Vowles has been
Oh, James Val
one of
has
the
been amazing.
signings of the season. He's no longer a meme.
No, no, he's no longer. He's actually. I mean, yeah, he's getting the best out of like drivers like Albon anyway, and I
Yeah,
feel like you know, and he's worked with obviously drivers at Mercedes before, so you can see that he's tapping
he's
into a
been
bit of
part of a title-winning side, and he knows what it needs.
exactly.
He knows
And I
how
think,
they can improve, and I would love to see Williams again. They haven't challenged for a championship in nearly 30 years. They haven't won a race in 11 years.
yeah,
They haven't been
but
on the podium since that time as well, I don't think. Oh no, there was George Russell at 2021 but at Belgium, but that
oh
wasn't
yeah, of
really a
course, yeah.
race.
When Russell had his ridiculous drives in Williams, which was
I know,
yeah,
but that wasn't a race. That was two laps behind the safety car and then it was abandoned.
it was, yeah, yeah. So
That was
it's
it was a terrible show.
So unless unfortunate circumstances happened, yeah, you would never see that. But now, hopefully, they're on the right track. So if they start to, finish in the 10 regularly, I mean, that's good enough, I think, for the
I
next
feel
couple of
next season
seasons.
that's something they need to that's the next step. The
Yeah,
first season with Albon, it was let's just see how many points we can get, and they did.
yeah,
And again, I'm pretty sure apart from one race out where Latifi got some points, it was mostly Albon. This season, they've been more consistent, and they've even on circuits where the car's not necessarily suited to it, Albon has found a way.
yeah, exactly.
and and so I feel like next season their aim should be more consistent, definitely more regular Q2, Q2 appearances, and then uh points, regular
Exactly.
points, even if
Exactly. I
it's the
think that,
lower realms of the top 10. If you're doing that on a consistent basis,
yeah, exactly. And that's what they need just for the team to build, and for the investors to be happy and then everything in the right direction.
yeah.
So for this final stint of our first episode, let's move on to our final topic, which is going to be uh,
The other
ra-
part of this channel,
another part of this channel, which is sim racing games.
racing
So,
games in general.
so what I wanted to do today is have a little bit of a discussion about, and then we can have a comparison in how they play on the wheel and on the controller. So I picked out a few games we both have or both played.
Yeah.
So the first game I would like to go into, because I've noticed this plays completely different, is the original Project Cars. So the
Oh,
first Project Cars. So I want you to tell me what was your experience playing the original Project Cars?
well, my experience
Yeah.
on the controller wasn't the best. I liked
Okay.
the game, and I liked, the amount of stuff that there was on there, but on a controller it was not the best. You never felt in control of your car at
It
all.
it was not designed for controller because
It
I
was
had it
not.
on controller. In fact, you purchased it for me because you bought me a PS4
I did.
and
I'm a
and
good friend like that.
you are indeed. Got me a copy of Project Cars, and I tried it, and I remember thinking, "Wow, there's so much detail in this.
There's
This is clearly
potential.
there's clearly a great sim here." But it wasn't until I got a wheel, and this was the wheel before this one,
Yeah.
a wheel that didn't have force feedback. But even though it didn't have force feedback, when you were on the wheel, it made sense because that game has been designed for
Mm,
those inputs. So it wasn't really until Project Cars 2, I believe, that they kind of figured that out. So
yeah.
I feel
Project Cars
like
2
because
is a
we
lot better on a controller than the first one. I mean, I'm
because
not
we
going to lie, it would probably be better on a wheel. It's probably the one racing game I own where a wheel would be nice.
definitely, I mean, the experience on wheel is fantastic. It really feels like you're driving, racing a car. Whereas, obviously, on controller, you haven't quite got that level of immersion. But at least I think they figured out with Project Cars 2 how to make it work on a
Yeah,
drivable, which is good. Yeah,
exactly. I
not
feel
I
like it's a bit
go on.
like Assetto Corsa. I feel like the first Assetto Corsa was definitely designed for people with a wheel.
Yeah. Oh,
Because my
definitely.
God,
Yeah.
that game is terrifying.
Oh, it's terrible. I played, like I was telling you, I played Competizione for the first time yesterday,
Competizione is solid.
and man, I was on the wheel on Competizione taking one of those what was it GT3 cars
Yeah.
around Monza, and my wheel's shaking, and I'm in this thing, and it's accelerating. And I go, holy!
Ah!
The expletives coming out of my mouth as I was, and,
I
as
demand video of this now.
and I went, and my brake pedal, right? My brake pedal didn't go down enough. I was like, stop.
You're just there tapping the brake line. Why is this car not stopping?
And luckily, within the last millisecond, it stopped just in time. And I made the turn around the first chicane. And I'm like, what has happened?
And then there was a meter of feces.
Yeah, exactly.
Jimmy Nuttall crapped himself
Yeah,
in
that's
his
it.
car. In
Yeah,
his car.
man.
If
It
you
was
heard if you heard the sound of a ding-a-ling-a-ling, that was the bell at my house.
the bell has been rung.
The bell has been rung. It never stops in the podcast world. It never stops at all.
So obviously, Project Cars 2 great game. We both play that quite
Oh
regularly.
yes.
It's good. Now, another one we both play, I'd like to talk about a little bit is Gran Turismo Sport.
What was that? Sorry.
Gran Turismo Sport.
Gran Turismo Sport, the ultimate driving simulator. Not my words, the words of Polyphony Digital.
Yeah,
Um, what do I think of Gran Turismo Sport? Well, I'll tell you the thing. The pros to it are the cars are incredibly detailed.
yeah.
The circuit still looks stunning, even if it's on a PS5. Um, uh, However, it's not a sim. I don't think it is. The
It
handling
yeah,
to it doesn't indicate being a sim racer, and also the fact that you always have to be online for it infuriates me.
it is very much like you say, it's not quite there. Like with a steering wheel with force feedback, it does improve the experience
Yes, I can
somewhat.
imagine.
And because of the fluctuations you get from the car, it does make the racing that little bit more challenging. However, I'm still able to set up arcade races on Gran Turismo Sport on hardest setting, and it's unlikely that I won't win because it's just not as whereas something like Project Cars, I really have to put in hours of practice to
Oh, you do. You can't
get
just do
to.
a race on Project Cars and expect to be quick immediately, which is,
Yeah,
you know, my issue. I'm always like, I'm going to do this.
yeah,
Like, I was talking to you about trying to do the Triple Crown of Motorsport on Project
yeah.
Cars too. That would take some serious practice.
It really would. It really would take some serious practice. Like, and there's also like only certain cars. Like, I've got really okay because I won't say good because like if you compare with like the charts of like lap times people do around the world, like I'm just an average gamer, right? But um, or like driving like the old Lotuses, like the Tim Clark Lotuses, like I can get them around Monza and stuff like that. But then as soon as I go into another car that I'm not used to, you
Yeah,
know what I mean? Like you'd have to be like, okay, which car are you going to do, the Triple Crown with? And then you'd have to practice with that car, make sure that you can get that round, make sure that it's not going to slide out because you've put too much input on the pedal and all this kind of stuff.
yeah.
It's same on controller, I'm sure as well, because
Mm.
any kind of like slip of the finger might put you in the wall. Ooh.
Steady.
Yeah.
Steady, James, steady.
Uh,
What's the next game on the list?
the next one was Dirt 2.0.
Oh God. I still have nightmares. I suck at rally games. The fact that I own a rally game, which when I was having to do
Yeah,
my, because as you know, my PS5, I need to increase the storage. It says a lot that when I was doing a purge of games to,
yeah,
install the ones I bought yesterday, says a lot that WRC5 is still there. Like I
yeah.
haven't, because WRC5 is the first proper rally game I've owned in years where I'm like, aha! I found one I'm okay at, and I definitely do want to try the EA Sports one when it comes out. Namely because I think they've got handling options to suit.
Yes, I think they're gonna make it. The good thing about this new game is it looks
It's going to be
really
like the F1 games.
exactly. It's going to be really accessible. The settings are going to be really accessible for those who just want to enjoy, the experience of rally without it being a simulator. They want a rally game and they
Yeah,
want to drive it, you know, maybe with a controller or maybe on where it doesn't matter, and with it assist on, and it's fine. Same time, because it uses the dirt kind of physics engine, I believe, and
yeah,
because and stuff, it is going to be able to replicate, hardcore rally simulator.
it
So
is. It is.
yeah,
Whereas Dirt 2.0, if you were not, if you had not played the first game of their proper sim rally series, and I'm not talking Dirt's 1, 2, 3, I'm talking like when they did Dirt Rally. If you had
yeah,
not
yeah.
played those, or you'd never played a rally game in your life, that was not the game for you because it is so hard.
It's hard. Like, and
Rallycross was all right on there though. I would re-download it for Rallycross.
the Rallycross is good. Like, interestingly, Project Cars 2 and Dirt 2.0 have one of the same Rallycross circuit.
Is it
And
Lydden Hill?
is it at the one in Norway, right?
Possibly.
It's one of the ones in Norway. Anyway, I forget the name of it. I think it begins with L, so it could be that.
Yeah.
And it's my goodness, like the closeness of driving because I practiced driving it on Dirt 2.0 and then I drove it on Project Cars as
Yeah.
well. And they've both done such a good job with the rallycross. But I think Dirt 2.0, because it's got the rallycross license, it's even more a bit more immersive an experience for rallycross. It's good for normal rally as well, but it's extremely difficult. It is extremely
Yes,
difficult.
it
You
is.
have to pump a lot of
I
hours in.
can't deny that it's a very, 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 very good looking game, and it is. You know, the mechanics are very solid. And it's very good. It's just that if you are me, who's a relative noob who doesn't have a wheel, um, it's not great at all.
Exactly.
It's great. It's just very, very hard, like
It's
extremely hard.
It's the same with to be fair with console as well. It's limited because of the fact that there isn't, or I can't seem to find a handbrake extension for sim racing setups on console. They seem to only be available for PCs. So,
Yeah,
of
it's
course, if you
annoying.
get really good at rally games, when you get to a hairpin, usually they do a quick flick of the handbrake, and it gets them round.
Yeah,
So I find myself just racing with like old minis so that I don't need to use a handbrake because
nice.
yeah,
You
because
just
it's like,
race with
well,
a Mini Cooper around this track. It'll be fine.
yeah. So like taking a mini around the Argentinian stages or something like that seems to be my go-to.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what I also wanted to do with these games as well is kind of establish uh, where we rank them in terms of like realism. As well. So we've talked about
Oh
realism.
yes, the ranking system. I will be there. Hold on just 2 seconds. Again, it never stops in this household. This is what happens when you invest in things to make the house look nice. Anyway, ranking of the games. Right.
Yeah.
So the
So,
options are.
so So we can first we can rank them in terms of realism, and then finally we can rank them in terms of fun.
What about the F1 games?
Oh yes, I just was just about to mention as well. We'll include the F1 game series in there as well in this ranking. Yeah,
Okay.
and we will talk more about the F1 series. I think in the next ranking.
As episodes go on.
Yes, yeah. So we'll
Okay.
include the F1 series as well. So realism first. Let's rank. So you on controller
Yeah.
and rank yours first in terms of realism, and then I'll do one for on the wheel.
I think Project Cars 2 would be top of my list.
Yeah,
I think Project Cars 2, and based on what I've briefly played of Competizione, that would be second.
yeah,
Then I'm gonna say potentially GT Sport. I want to say F1, but I feel like F1, as much as it wants to be an F1 sim, it also has to be accessible to other people. So
yeah.
I think if I had to do, I would do Project Cars 2, ACC, GT Sport, and then you'd have to put Dirt Rally 2.0, and then you put F1.
Interesting. So there's our controller lineup for realism. So that's a controller experience. So for the wheel, it's going to differ slightly.
Yeah.
From what I briefly played this yesterday of Competizione, I can already tell that like practically blows your bollocks off, and that because of that single experience going around Monza, that already tops the list because I've never felt more immersed in a game than I have in terms of that. And I spent a few laps really, and then it actually hurt my wrists as well. I did a few laps and I was like, I'm not physically ready for this. So that was
I have not trained well enough for this.
exactly. So I'm gonna have to go back and do some exercises with a kettlebell and get my wrist stronger.
I
So
mean, I can think of another exercise you could do, but
there are alternative
there are
exercises
alternative exercises.
which we will not mention here, but
The Institute of Advanced Motorists.
all men know, but I feel like one race would be stronger than the other in all. But anyway, I digress. So ACC would be top. Then Project Cars 2 is a fantastic simulator, probably one
Yes.
on console. And just a range of cars and everything and the realism. Even when I had a steering wheel without force feedback, it was the only game that I played with a steering wheel without force feedback, where it actually felt like you got some connection from the tires to the
Mm,
wheel because it would actually like uh, throw you off on the wheel on certain cars, especially like older cars like the 60s one.
yeah.
Third, I would probably go Dirt 2.0 because it's a fantastic rally sim.
Yes.
Um, It's probably on par really with Project Cars 2. It's just that I play a little bit more Project Cars 2. Then
Yeah,
I would have to go. Now this is hard actually between Gran Turismo and the F1 games because I feel when you've got a wheel and when you set them up how you want to set them up, I'm probably going to say now that F1, like for instance, if I'm on taking an F1 car around Monaco with no assists on,
yeah.
it feels pretty good. It feels pretty realistic. It feels challenging, you know. So I'm
And it
probably
also
going,
confirms that you are 100% bonkers for doing that.
yeah. And I actually quite like Monaco now as well as the circuit. So that shows that I'm even crazier. So but it's
I
interesting
will tame it. I
because
will.
the drivers all say they enjoy it. So once you like with the wheel and you start driving around it, at first you're like, oh my god, this is horrible. But then after you start to get round it, and then there's places where you feel brave enough to then start going faster, and you're like, oh my goodness. And I'm only now getting there where I'm starting to get brave enough. So I will say probably F1 slightly over Gran Turismo, but there's not much in it because some of those like everyday cars in Gran Turismo, when you drive them on the wheel, do feel really good. But when it comes to stuff like F1 cars and like the GT cars, the Le Mans cars,
Mm.
they really don't feel as detailed as they do in
They're
the
a bit
more hardcore
stiff.
sims. Yeah, they don't feel as detailed as they do in the hardcore sims
True.
at all. So I've got decent times in LMP1 cars on Gran Turismo that I would definitely not get round the circuit on Project Cars, for instance, or
And it just
definitely
goes to
wouldn't get
show, and
on
it just goes to show
SCC.
that no racing game is truly the same.
Yeah, they're not really the same. But that being said, I feel that they all are useful in terms of
Yes.
like learning a racing line. There's none of these games that wouldn't teach you that. It's just the volatility of the car. If you're looking at like what real race drivers use, the only one of those that real race drivers really use. Actually, they used to play Project Cars 2 back in the day when it was more
Well,
popular. But
Project Cars 2, well, the first two Project Cars were actually developed by racing drivers.
developed by racing, actually still held as quite in quite high regard. But I know that people still play ACC like racing drivers and what have you,
Mm,
and R Factor 2, but they're not available on consoles. We don't have any experience with those ones, of course. And they sound
exactly.
ridiculously difficult and detailed. Like
Well,
you've got to do like many things to setups and yeah.
there's one I keep seeing called Grand Prix 4, which came out like back in the 90s or early 2000s, and people say it's still like the pinnacle of like open wheel F1 sims.
Oh, it's a
And
bit like Richard Burns Rally is still seen as the pinnacle of rally sims. Actually, it still
oh,
seems like best.
rest in peace, Richard Burns. And obviously
Yeah,
the Colin McRae Rally series, which then became Dirt.
yeah,
I
and
have
they
I have the PS1 version of Colin McRae Rally 2 on my little handheld. So good.
well, they're still so good. Actually, I think the
Mm,
Rally was probably they had it right before F1 in video games in terms of realism. I think they were way further
yeah,
ahead.
I agree.
The F1 games have always been fun back in the day, but then didn't start to focus on realism until like the last kind of 10, 15 years. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I think that brings us pretty much to like
The
where we
end.
are, the end for the first episode. So
A solid opening start.
it is indeed. So if you are interested in learning more about motorsport, sim racing, and listening to us two chat about it,
And
then
rant about
please,
Lance Stroll.
yes, we will definitely rant about Lance Stroll much more as the series progresses. So feel free to
Please,
like,
Lance,
comment.
if you've got lawyers, don't come and find me.
No. Instead, like, subscribe, and follow. Yes. So
Smooth.
smooth indeed. So it's a goodbye from me.
And it's a goodbye from him and
Keep
me.
racing.
And we are and we're stopped. Oh,